All right, this is going to be the last hand here of this part one of this Turning Stone video series. And you can see I'm in the big blind. This is about 45 minutes later after the deep hand. I haven't really played any hands except for one specific hand where I called Thomas with 4-5 of diamonds and then just folded on the flop. It wasn't even worthy of showing. So I haven't played many hands here at all. Again, 45 minutes later. This is once again a hand that I go over in detail on the podcast, so I'm not going to go over it as much because there's a lot of things going on here. But, you know, one of the first tweets that I ever made out or wrote about in Card Player is, the best way to maximize when you flop the nut flush is to fast play it, right? Because of the propensity for people to understand that when you wake up on a later street, you're repping a very, very strong hand. Here we have Alec Torelli open from early position with ace nine of spades. Canuli and Glance call, and I decide to just call in the big blind with pocket eights. Now you can see here, I think I started the hand with like maybe $9,000, something like that. And also too, the pot's not straddled. So, we were dealing with about like 180, 190 big blinds effective. You can see I flop top set, and Torelli, the pre-flop raiser, flops the nut flush. The other thing that I talked about on this week's podcast is sometimes understanding that a player is never going to turn an ace as top pair into a bluff, and we'll see that happen here in a second. This is interesting. I check it. It gets checked to Glance. He makes a bet. I just thought if I came and led out here on the flop, it would be pretty strong. I actually started the hand with about 8,000. It would be pretty strong. I also thought that if I check raised here, it would also be pretty strong. I mean, you could probably go either way with it. Yeah, sure. I risk the chance of a fourth spade coming out. I risk the chance of action killers if I just call and check the turn. I give free cards. All that stuff is very, very valid thinking. Glance was kind of short. I mean, you could easily make the case. I could make it like 1,200 here, but it's very, very strong to do that, I think, on a monotone board with a set. Like, you might say that all hands except flushes might, or smaller sets might fold. So I thought it might be slightly an overplay. So here I decide to call. And again, like I said in the podcast in detail, Torelli makes a very, very peculiar play here in my eyes. Obviously, I don't know what his hand is, but he overcalls the flop. And I was like, wow, that's really strange because I would have figured the naked ace of spades would have bet the flop a lot. So when he overcalls, I was like, all right, well, he can have a couple of different hands. He could be playing like a red overpair, safe, like two red queens, two red kings, something like that. He could have maybe a high flush draw that's not the nut flush draw with overcards in the form of like ace king with the king of spades, king queen with the king of spades. But even then, it's debatable whether he's going to overcall. He might, he's getting some pot odds. Those were the hands that I kind of thought, or of course, he's sandbagging the stone cold nuts. So the overcall as the preflop raiser was definitely peculiar to me, and I was hyper aware of the possibility that something strange was going on. That card right there really saved me when you see what happens here throughout the hand. The turn is an offsuit ace. And the reason why I'm saying that is because what we'll see here is that Canuli's out of the hand, that it's going to get checked through here. Check, I check, check, Glance checks. All right, now I think I've got the best hand as long as another spade doesn't come out. It doesn't. The river's an offsuit 10. The pot's 18-25, and I'm like, all right, well, now it's time for me to value bet here. I want to get called maybe by like ace X of spades, something like that. So I'm going to come out and I'm going to value bet, not super big. I think I bet maybe like 1,100. And what's going to happen, maybe 12 or 1150. What's going to happen here is Torelli is going to think about it for a little bit, and he's going to make a rather large raise to 46 or 4,700. Now, the reason why this whole hand goes down, or why I think this hand is so interesting, and why I say that I bet 1,100, why the ace is so interesting, is because remember what I said about what I thought that he raises to 4,500. What did I think that his flop check over calling range was as the preflop raiser? I thought it was a red overpair, right, that was playing safe. I thought that it was a hand like ace king with the king of spades, I thought that he would bet the ace of spades a fair amount, but maybe, maybe he does check it three ways, the ace of spades. Or I thought he was sandbagging the nuts. The reason why that the most important card in this hand is the turn is because, as I talked about in detail on the podcast this week, almost no one turns ace X of spades here into a bluff. It's basically impossible. Now, Torelli, I'm saying Torelli is capable. He's a world-class player. But in any of the games that you guys play, no one's ever turning what is an ace as top pair into a bluff. So that's why the turn really, really saves me. And when you go and watch this, whenever this comes out, actually, which is basically, maybe sometimes in 2016 when this comes out as an actual TV show, if they have the volume piped up, you'll hear Torelli say, "What do you have a set?" And then I said, "Are you turning the ace of spades into a bluff?" And I just thought that there was no way that he's turning the ace of spades into a bluff. I mean, and it's so infrequent that a guy raises basically the river as a total stone cold bluff. The only stone cold bluff that he could have here would be like king queen with the king of spades. If he's never raising the ace of spades as a bluff, then and just calling, then the only bluff, like I said, would be like king queen with the king of spades. And I think that that's somewhat suicidal with the line that I take here because I look really strong. Remember, I call, it gets checked through, and then I lead. Like he doesn't know that I don't have the nut flush. So I really feel like to make that bluff there, or most commonly to make that bluff, he would need to have at least the nut flush blocker. And because people don't turn top pair, which is an ace, into a bluff, it allowed me to easily fold that hand. Now it's different if the turn maybe is like an offsuit 3, and then the river's an offsuit 10. Okay, well then maybe I make, I think, well, he could have the ace of spades. He's raising with air here as a bluff. He's got the nut flush blocker, and he's just raising as a bluff. He doesn't have enough showdown call, value to call just with ace high. But here, he either has top pair, right, with the ace that he's not going to turn into a bluff, or he's sandbagging the nuts. So the best way to win a big pot when you flop the nut flush is to play it fast. Because if you do some bullshit that's tricky, you can see how waking up later on makes a thinking player think that you're sandbagging something.